This is the study guide for benchmark 1, the practice test side, and so let's take a look at some of the problems that we'll end up experiencing on that benchmark. So the first one, we have to solve an equation. And when I'm solving an equation, I always look to see once I've combined the terms on one side, and there's nothing to combine here. I've got an r term and an 8. Here we have an 8 and an r term. Whenever you see the r term, or the variable term in this case, is exactly the same, it will cancel out on both sides. And so look for that, and that will help you figure out the problem a little faster. Because when I go ahead and subtract the 6r, it's going to cancel out on both sides. I'm left with just two numbers. Those two numbers do not equal, so in this case I have no solution for this problem. If the two numbers did equal, then it would be infinitely many solutions. We might see that in the next one. If we did not cancel out the r term, then we would only have one solution. So let's continue on, try this problem. Here I'm going to distribute the 1/4 over the n and the 6, and I've got 1/4 n. Over here, the 4 and the 6 have a common factor. See, 4 and 6 both have 2, so this will change to a 2, and this will change to a 3. So when I go ahead and multiply straight across, and I'll show that over here, the 1/4 times by 6 over 1, the 4 changes to a 2, the 6 changes to a 3. I multiply across, and I'm left with that 3 halves, so minus 3 halves. On the other side, I have exactly the same term. So whenever we have that, the variable term's the same on both sides, you see those 1/4 n's are going to cancel out. If you subtract 1/4 n from both sides, they'll make 0. They'll cancel each other out, and we're left with an identity. I've got the same term on both sides. And so again, that's called an identity when the numbers equal each other like this. And that means that we have infinitely many solutions. So that would be our answer in this case. So we've got two different types of problems here. One where the variable term canceled out, and we were left with two numbers that did not equal. That's no solution. When they do equal, we have an identity, and that means we have infinitely many solutions. So let's move on to the next one. And it says the area of a trapezoid is A equals 1/2 h times b1 plus b2. Solve the formula for h. Okay, so I want to get h by itself. So I've got this, A equals 1/2 times by h, and then b1 plus b2. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that 1/2. So I do that by canceling out the 1/2 by multiplying by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal is going to be 2 over 1. That's going to cancel out these 2's, and I'm left with just 2a equals, and then I've got the h times by b1 plus b2. So I go ahead and now I want to get rid of the b1 plus b2 because I want to get h by itself. So I'm going to divide by b1 plus b2. So when I do that, the h term will be by itself, and I've got this as the expression solved for h. And so now what I'm going to do, since I've got that part solved for, I'm going to go ahead and substitute in some numbers. So it says, what is the height if the area is 600? So 2 times by 600. And base 1 is 10, and base 2 is 20. So 10 plus 20. So the fraction bar is a grouping symbol. It says I have to do the work in the grouping symbol first. So I'm going to combine those two. And I can go ahead and multiply the 2 by 600, and that gives me 1200. And down below I've got 30. So one thing that will cancel out is these zeros. And then just divide 3 into 12 or 120, and that would just go 40 times. So 40 is the h value, and those are feet. So I'll put a little foot symbol there, and that would be our next answer to that problem. Let's take a look at the next problem here, and it is another equation. And I'm going to go ahead and solve by using that distributive property again. So I multiply 1/3 by 15, that gives me negative 5x. And then 1/3 of 9 is just 3, so I'm dividing 3 into 15, 3 into 9. And so on this side I've got 3 minus 4x. So remember in the last two problems I had ones in which the variable terms equaled. Here they do not, and that should be an x, not an n, so let me fix that. So now they're not the same, so they will not cancel in this case. So I'll go ahead and add 4x to both sides. So I'm going to have exactly one solution here. And so when we don't cancel out the variable terms, that's what's going to happen. So I've got now 3 equals negative x plus 3. Well, watch this, though. You see, I've got the same constant on both sides. They're going to cancel. So when I do that, I get 0 equals negative x. Well, if I divide it by negative 1, I'll just get 0. And that's not a no solution. That's exactly one solution. That's the only number that will work in this equation to make this equation an equality if I go ahead and substitute the 0 in there. And that is 0. So that is my answer. Now it says to draw the figure and its reflection in the x-axis. And so that means across the x-axis. So I'm going to go over 1 up 2 spaces for A, and then over 3 up 2 for B, and then over 1 up 4 spaces for C. So there's my figure. Then I'm going to reflect it across the x-axis. So I'm just going to count the spaces. It's 2 spaces down, so I'll go 2 spaces on the other side of the x-axis. So that's going to be my A prime, my B prime, and C prime is going to be down a little bit further because it's got to go 4 spaces. So what are the coordinates? Well, you just write them. A prime, that's going to be 1, negative 2. So notice the only thing that changes when you go across the x-axis is the y component. It switches sign. And the B value is going to be 3, negative 2. C prime is going to be 1, negative 4. On the next one, it says we got to reflect across the y-axis, so we plot the points over 2 up 2 for M, and then I've got to go over 2 up 3 spaces for N, and then over 3 up 3 for P, and then over 4 just up 1 space for Q. So it's a quadrilateral, kind of like a kite, similar to that, and I go ahead and reflect it across the y-axis. So the y-axis is going this way. So you count the spaces. So 2 spaces over for M, and then 1 space over for N, and then it looks like 3 spaces for P. So it's going to be right there, negative 3, 3. And then Q is 4 spaces from the y-axis, so 4 spaces over. So that's what the figure will end up looking like. So this will be M prime, N prime, P prime, and Q prime. So to write those points, notice that what happens is the x value changes sign. So M is going to be negative 2, 2. N is negative 2, 3. P is going to be negative 3, 3. And Q is negative 4, 1. So moving on to the next one, it says the figures are similar. Find the length of side DF, this side right here. So that's going to be my side I'm trying to find. I'm going to set up a proportion. So there's lots of ways to set them up. This is the way I'm going to do it. 3:9. Okay, so I'm just going to take 2 sides from the figure that I'm given, 3:9, and then I'm going to find the corresponding sides and put them in the right spot that correspond to each other. So like 3 corresponds to 7, so I'm going to put 7 on top, where 9 and x correspond, so I'll put x on the bottom. So lots of ways to set them up. The main thing is 3 is diagonal from the x. As long as you have that, you're doing just fine. So before I do this, I'm going to do some cross canceling. I'm going to go ahead and take out the common factor. I'm going to divide 3 by 3 and 3 into 9. And then I'll just multiply 1 times x is 1x. And then 3 times 7, so 3 times 7, that makes 21. So 21 meters is the answer. Well, taking a look at the last 3 problems, and the first one says the ratio of the side of square A to the length of side square B. So A to B means that when I set up the fraction, I'm going to do it this way, A to B. Now it says it's 4:9, the side lengths. That's the ratio. So they don't necessarily mean the sides were 4 and 9. It just means that they reduced down to this. They could have been 4 and 9 though. And it says that the perimeter of square B is 108. So since I have square B down here, the side length of it, I'll put the 108 down the bottom, x on top. So as long as I multiply 9 and x, I'll get the right answer here. And then I'll do 4 times 108. So I'm going to do this little trick. I'm going to divide by 9. Now, instead of multiplying the 4 times 108, I saw 9 went into 108. Goes in there, let's see, it's 12 times. And so I go ahead and multiply across, I've got 48. So now I go ahead and say, okay, that's the perimeter of square A. So square A has a perimeter that's equal to 48. So if I divide that by 4, that's going to give me 12 units. So 12, and these are yards. So 12 yards, that's what each side's going to be. So now I want to find the area, and the area is just going to be 12 times 12. So that's going to be 144 yards squared. Well, this next one says the figures are similar. The ratio of perimeters is 8 to 3. Okay, so the ratio of perimeters is 8 to 3. Now, as long as we've got just distance, perimeters or sides, the ratio is going to be the same. So I can set up a proportion this way. 8 is to 3 as, and then 16 is to x. Now, I put 16 on top because 8 is the bigger number, so I want to make sure I have them in the same location, so the corresponding sides at least. And so then I'll go ahead and put the x with the 3 since that's the smaller figure, and I'll go ahead and cross multiply. So 8x equals 3 times 16. So you can do the same trick again. You don't have to multiply 3 and 16 because when you divide by 8, 8 goes into 16 2 times, and it makes the math go pretty quick. See, 3 times 2 makes 6, so 6 inches would be what x is. But then it asks for what is the ratio of the areas. Well, ratio of areas is just going to be the square of 8 to 3. So I need to square those two numbers. So you square 8, you get 64. You square 3, you get 9. So that would be the ratio of areas. Ratio of areas. So the next one is just like this first one we did over here. So same sort of thing, just different numbers. A to B is what they're doing here, because ratio of side length of square A to ratio of side length of square B is 9 to 16. So it says the perimeter of B is 64. So I'll put that down the bottom, and I'll put an x right here, try to find that perimeter. And I'll go ahead and cross multiply. 16x equals 9 times 64. So I see the same thing. Now this doesn't always work out, but I see that 16 goes into 64 4 times. Multiply across, I get x equals 36. So that's the perimeter. That's the perimeter. So I want to find the side length. So remember, the perimeter is the distance all the way around. Four numbers, all the same size. So I'm going to just take that, or same length at least. I'm going to take that 36, divide it by 4, and that's going to give me 9. So 9 units, or 9 yards, is what the length of each side is. So when I multiply 9 and 9, I get an area of 9 squared, which is 81 yards. Oops, gotta get the 1 in there. 81 yards squared. And that would be my answer. So those are the problems that are similar to what you're going to experience on that benchmark test. Good luck.